Hello friends, Pastor Drew here. I'm joined by Jane Kreiser, our lay delegate to annual conference, and we are here to bring you a recap of all that we accomplished together at annual conference last Friday through Sunday at Lake Junaluska. Annual conference is the yearly meeting of pastors and lay leaders from churches all across the Western North Carolina Conference, where we worship together and vote on important topics such as pension and missions and various petitions. And it's one of my favorite parts of being a United Methodist. Now, Jane, before we get any further, what was your favorite part of annual conference this year?
So what stuck out to me this year was, in the midst of all the chaos and division, there was reconciliation and love for all of God's people. We didn't ignore the divisions, but embraced the fact that Jesus came for all of us. There was definitely a Holy Spirit among us. Another thing that stuck out to me was there was hundreds of us United Methodists gathered together, and probably, I would say, about 90% of us or more are over 60. And this year we had to vote for 3 new delegates to go to General Conference next year. And so we had to do this on electronic devices. We had to do it either on our phone, our laptop, or our iPads. And we did it. I had the task of helping some of the people that were having difficulty. And I got to help a young man that was probably in his early 20s, and that was my excitement for this. I think that you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Amen. Thank you. And Jane did a fantastic job serving as an usher. And indeed, one of the delegates we elected is a young man who is 20 years old, who will be representing our conference at General Conference. And we're very proud to have a diverse delegation representing us. For me, the most powerful part of conference was our opening worship service. Conference is not just about the business of the church, but it's about coming together and worshiping Jesus together. The service began with the district superintendents and representatives from all around the conference bringing in stones from their districts, from their churches, and stacking them on the altar, representing all the different land that is represented in the Western North Carolina Conference and the different ways that God is moving in these lands. Anytime you have 1,000 people in an auditorium singing old Charles Wesley hymns, there's nothing like it. And of course, the sermon that was preached for that opening worship service by Reverend Dr. Candace Lewis, the Dean of Gammon Theological Seminary, one of our 13 United Methodist seminaries, was outstanding. I felt the Spirit move in that. She brought the word, folks. And we are 40 minutes away from Lake Junaluska here at Salem. And I would just love if next year we could have a few carfuls of people drive on down to Lake Junaluska for the opening worship service next year. I'll take you out to lunch after we worship God together. It would be wonderful to have our church represented well. Now, we didn't just worship and lounge around at the lake all day. We got down to doing some important work. Jane, can you give us a summary of the work that we accomplished this weekend?
We passed 21 petitions and approved a new task force. The petitions were from finance to social issues. Without speaking on each one of the petitions, I'll highlight some of them. We approved a budget for 2024 that is $1.4 million less than last year's budget. Yay. This budget includes a 2% reduction of apportionments to local churches. You might be asking, what does the budget look like for the future since 15% of the churches disaffiliated? Well, the treasurer and the president of the finance committee assured us that we are in a position to be strong for years to come. There were several large churches that left that weren't paying their apportionments, thus not fulfilling their obligations, and a lot of small churches that were struggling. With this new budget, we are still funding missions like UMAR, Ministerial Education Fund, Disaster Relief Funds, camps, and VIM teams. We approved a pension plan for the conference to match the clergy contribution up to 4%. It was previously 1%, and this will be voted on at General Conference. We have a company called WestPath that works with our conference, that guides us in our investments, and over the years they have helped us tremendously, and I can compare WestPath to Gary when he guides us with our budget. We honored and closed 5 churches due to declining membership. We commissioned 18 new church plants and the Lighthouse congregation, and that's what we are. We elected 3 delegates for the 2024 General Conference. They are John Burby from Collins Grove, Sharika Brown from Winston-Salem, and Joseph Navarro from Pineville. And Joseph is the young one that Drew had alluded to. We looked at and approved Creation Care by approving a petition that looks at companies that encourage the use of less fossil fuel. We approved 3 months of paid parental leave for clergy. We passed 2 petitions regarding the inclusion of LGBTQ+ community. One, to remove the discriminatory language in our social principles and submit this to General Conference. And 2, we are going to have a task force to teach understanding. Bishop Carter paved his way with words at the beginning of the business session by assuring us that we will all be happy with some of the outcomes, and all of us will be sad by some. We all won't get our own way every time, but we will still work together, and I believe that we did that.
Thank you, Jane, for excellent summary and your good work on this and your faithfulness in representing our church at conference. I want to speak for a very brief moment about the parental leave petition that Jane mentioned. Quite a few of you have come to me with questions in the week since conference has happened, and I wanted to just elaborate on it for a moment. The Book of Discipline, which, as you know, is the rule book that governs the United Methodist Church, in paragraph 355, states that clergy are entitled to paid parental leave for up to a quarter of the year, that is 12 to 13 weeks. However, the discipline only guarantees compensation for the first 8 weeks of that quarter of the year. The petition that was nearly unanimous in passing at annual conference pledged that pastors in the Western North Carolina Conference would be guaranteed paid parental leave, not just for that full 8 weeks, which was what we already have, but for the full quarter of the year, which is the denominational standard. And it pledged that the conference, through apportionment dollars from larger churches, would help smaller churches such as Salem fund these extra few weeks, fund the interim who would come in to serve while the pastor is away on paid parental leave. That's the connection at work. That's us leaning on some of our brothers and sisters who have more resources. That's one of the benefits of doing the church together. You don't have to walk through this journey alone. Applying for paid parental leave is a process that the pastor initiates with Pastor-Parish Relations Committee and the district superintendent, and ultimately they have to get the bishop's signature in order to do this. It's a process. Now, I'm very proud of our annual conference for listening to the younger pastors in their 30s who created this petition. I'm proud of the church for choosing to prioritize the well-being of families, parents, and their children. You know, the church, more than any institution in the world, should be setting the standard for what it means to have healthy and thriving families. And I like to think that we did that at this conference. We did something that not many other places have done. Now, some, since I've come back, have remarked to me that they find this petition to be unfair because we didn't have it this way when I was growing up, so why should you? Or we don't have it this way right now in my job, so why should you have this? I would say to that, perhaps what is not fair is what you went through when you were coming up. Or perhaps what is not fair is the situation you're in right now. Perhaps what isn't fair is that the United States is the only developed country in the world that does not guarantee paid parental leave for anyone. I think that's wrong. And I think rather than pointing the finger at the church, we should be proud of the church for saying, let's do something different, and let's do something that's just, and let's lift up families, and let's set a higher standard for our families. And let's show the rest of our culture, the rest of the country, how it ought to be done. It's never a bad time to do the right thing, to raise the bar. It's never a bad time to prioritize children and parents. It's never a bad time to have empathy. And I think we all need to have empathy to remember that the most important title that pastors have in their lives is not reverend or pastor, but the most important title that we'll ever have is husband and wife, mom and dad. And I'm proud of our church for recognizing that and putting families first.
Also, Drew, in the changing times, we have to look at, it's not just men anymore in the pulpit. There's a lot of female pastors, and this 3 months doesn't seem like very much if you look at the whole picture.
That is exactly right, Jane. Times have changed both in the church and in the world, where we now have women, mothers, serving as pastors, and we want to continue to lift them up and allow them to be with their families and to do the ministry that God has called them to do. We live in a society now where both men and women are working full-time in the workforce, where the majority of folks do not live near grandparents, and where the cost of childcare these days is equivalent to, if not greater than, the amount of most average paychecks. So we took a small step in the right direction, I think. Now, with all that said, Jane, if you had to summarize annual conference in one word, what would that word be?
I had to think about this, and I think the word that I came up was inclusion. John Wesley said, "We may not all think alike, we love alike." As Methodists, we are taught to love one another as we love Christ, and I felt that we are striving towards that perfection.
We are indeed on a journey to perfection every day by God's sanctifying grace. And even the conference is, even us, when you get a bunch of imperfect sinners together, we're all on that journey.
So what about you? What was your word to describe it?
My word, if I had to pick one to describe conference, and this is a word that Bishop Carter used quite frequently, is pivot. Pivot. If you're a fan of Friends, the TV show, you probably picture the scene of Ross yelling "pivot" as he's trying to move the couch up the stairs, excuse me. But no, pivot. We are pivoting from a time of disagreement and conflict to a time of coming together and unifying and rallying around the mission to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We are pivoting from a time of negativity to a time of uplifting, pivoting from a time of looking inward and bickering to moving back outward and getting back to business, a time to pivot our energies into discipleship and loving people, time to pivot from a place of weakness to finding a new place of strength. And pivoting is what we're doing here at Salem United Methodist Church in this season as we move into our new vision statement, move into who God is calling us to be in the community. It's an exciting time that I'm excited, fortunate to be a part of. Well, thank you, Jane, for your time in making this video. And I would encourage you all, if you have any questions about the work that was accomplished at annual conference, any questions about this video, to come see one of us during the week on Sunday, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
And I would also like to say thank you for the privilege of Salem sending me to this. It's always a time of reflection and getting to know what Methodism is all about. And I am, after going to one of these conferences, I'm always very proud to be a United Methodist. So thank you very much.
God bless you.